Black family history. The Black family is one of the oldest and most influential pureblood families in the wizarding world, and from them came Bellatrix, Narcissa, and Andromeda, the Black sisters. But the story of the Black family doesn't start with the sisters. It starts with their parents, Cygnus Black III and Druella Rosia. Cygnus came from a long, unbroken line of Blacks, a family so old their name was practically a brand in the wizarding world. The Blacks weren't just rich, they were powerful, connected, and terrifyingly obsessed with keeping their blood pure. Their family motto, toujours pur, meaning always pure, wasn't just a saying embroidered on their crest, it was a rule carved into their souls. Cygnus upheld that motto like law. He was the quiet kind of intimidating, the type who didn't need to raise his voice to make his point. Every move he made, every connection he approved had one purpose: to preserve the Black legacy. Then there was Druella Rosia from another pureblood family, just as proud and elitist as the Blacks. The Rosias had their own reputation for being charming in public and ruthless behind closed doors, and Druella carried both traits like an art form. She was elegant, coldly beautiful, and fiercely ambitious for her daughters. Under their roof, affection was rare, expectations were everything, and failure wasn't an option. The girls grew up surrounded by portraits of grim-faced ancestors staring down at them, reminding them of the legacy they were born to uphold. Dinners weren't filled with laughter, they were filled with lessons. Lessons about bloodlines, reputation, and who was worthy of their company. It wasn't parenting, it was indoctrination wrapped in luxury. Cygnus taught them pride, the idea that being a Black meant they were superior by birthright. Druella taught them control, how to smile in public, how to hide emotion, how to use grace as a weapon. Together they created an environment that rewarded obedience and punished individuality. And in that house, the sisters learned early on that love was conditional. It only came when they reflected the ideals of the family. But it wasn't only Cygnus and Druella who shaped the destiny of the Black sisters. Their worldview and the suffocating legacy they inherited was also forged by another infamous branch of the family. Walburga and Orion Black, the parents of Sirius and Regulus Black. Walburga Black, born to Pollux and Irma Black, was pureblood aristocracy personified, proud, venomous, and utterly obsessed with lineage. Her marriage to her cousin Orion wasn't about love, it was about preserving the purity of the family line. Inside 12 Grimmauld Place, Walburga ruled like a dark queen, her walls covered in relics of superiority and her portrait permanently cursed to scream insults about blood traitors long after her death. She famously burned names off the Black family tapestry, a physical reminder that disobedience was worse than death. She was the spiritual blueprint for Bellatrix, the same fiery conviction, the same disgust for anything impure, the same terrifying charisma that could make hate sound like heritage. Her husband Orion was no better, and together they helped forge the future of the Black family as we know it. Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix was the perfect Black daughter, at least by her family's standards. She wasn't just loyal to her heritage, she worshipped it. Bellatrix was born in 1951, and from a young age she displayed intense magical talent and a dangerous fascination with power. When she joined Slytherin House at Hogwarts, it wasn't just a sorting, it felt like destiny settling into place. Unlike her sisters, Bellatrix didn't just accept pureblood ideology, she craved supremacy. She believed in blood purity with fanatical devotion, and found someone who matched that darkness in Voldemort. While others followed him out of fear or obligation, Bellatrix followed him out of something disturbingly close to love. She wasn't just a Death Eater, she was Voldemort's most loyal weapon. After marrying Rodolphus Lestrange, a union clearly arranged to maintain bloodline prestige, Bellatrix transformed her obsession into action. Torture, intimidation, and magical dominance became her language. She carved her identity out of cruelty, becoming a symbol of what happens when pureblood pride turns into fanaticism. To her, the Black family legacy wasn't something to escape or adapt, it was something to enforce with fire and wand. Narcissa Malfoy. Narcissa Black didn't roar like Bellatrix or rebel like Andromeda. She survived. On the surface, she was everything a pureblood daughter was trained to be: elegant, composed, and loyal to her lineage. She married Lucius Malfoy, one of the wealthiest and most politically connected pureblood wizards, which instantly strengthened the ties between two of the most influential families, the Blacks and the Malfoys. But here's what makes Narcissa fascinating. She believed in blood purity, but she never worshipped Voldemort the way Bellatrix did. Her loyalty wasn't to ideology, it was to family, specifically her son Draco. While Bellatrix sought glory in chaos, Narcissa moved like a strategist in the shadows. She knew how to play the pureblood game without getting her hands dirty. Unlike her sister, Narcissa never took the dark mark. She stayed close to the Death Eaters, but always maintained just enough distance to protect herself and Draco. She understood power, but didn't crave violence. To the world, she was a Malfoy, but deep down she was still a Black, calculating, proud, and fiercely protective of her bloodline. And that quiet fire inside her would later lead to one of the most important moments in Hogwarts history. Andromeda Tonks. And then there was Andromeda, the sister who broke the pattern completely. Born into a family obsessed with blood purity, she was expected to marry within the sacred pureblood circle, just like her sisters. But Andromeda did something the Blacks considered worse than betrayal. She fell in love with a Muggle-born wizard, Ted Tonks. Andromeda didn't rebel loudly. She didn't create chaos or fight her family head-on. She simply chose love over legacy, and that quiet decision shook the House of Black to its core. Her name was literally burned off the Black family tapestry, erased like she had never existed. To them, she was dead. But in walking away, Andromeda became something the Blacks couldn't understand: free. And while Bellatrix clung to Voldemort and Narcissa navigated within pureblood expectations, Andromeda built a life based on choice, not heritage. She raised Nymphadora Tonks, a metamorphagus and proud member of the Order of the Phoenix, a living symbol of everything the Blacks tried to erase. She also fought against the Death Eaters and the reign of the Dark Lord. Pureblood ideology. To understand the Black Sisters, you've got to understand the world they were raised in. A world where blood wasn't just lineage, it was currency, status, and identity. Pureblood ideology was the backbone of the Black family. They believed that magic should remain exclusive to wizard-born families, untouched by Muggle influence, and that any dilution of that heritage was a direct insult to their legacy. Growing up, the sisters were surrounded by constant reminders of this belief. The Black family tapestry wasn't just decorative, it was a public declaration of purity, with every branch carefully preserved, unless someone dared to step out of line. In that case, you were scorched off the family legacy like you never existed. That visual threat hung over every child in the Black household: behave or vanish. This ideology wasn't taught gently either. It was drilled into them through tradition, marriage expectations, and even social circles. They were raised to look down on Muggle-borns, to see half-bloods as lesser, and to treat blood purity like almost a sacred law. But here's where it gets interesting. Each sister internalized that pressure differently. Bellatrix swallowed it whole and became its weapon. Narcissa walked the line, using it to her advantage without letting it consume her soul. Andromeda rejected it entirely, choosing love over bloodline. Pureblood superiority wasn't just a belief, it was the lens through which the Black sisters learned to see the world. And that ideological divide between them would eventually pull the family in three completely different directions. Family dynamics. The Black sisters weren't just divided by ideology. They were shaped by a family structure built on control, fear, and expectations. The Black household ran less like a loving family and more like a dynasty grooming its heirs. Emotions were secondary to legacy. Affection was conditional. Approval had to be earned through obedience. Bellatrix thrived in that environment. She chased her parents' approval with an intensity that later twisted into fanaticism. Narcissa learned quickly that obedience meant protection, so she became the polished, composed daughter, less fiery than Bellatrix, but still loyal enough to keep her place within the family's graces. Andromeda, however, felt the emotional coldness of the Black household more deeply than her sisters. Unlike Bellatrix, she didn't crave their approval. Unlike Narcissa, she didn't adapt to survive. She quietly planned her escape. What makes their dynamic fascinating is that they were never truly enemies growing up. They were sisters. They grew up under the same roof, attended the same pureblood events, shared the same lessons, and probably whispered secrets to each other as children. But as Voldemort rose and lines were drawn, the Black family dynamic turned into a war zone of loyalty versus individual freedom. By the time Andromeda married Ted Tonks, Bellatrix saw it as treason, Narcissa saw it as a tragedy, and the rest of the Black family treated it like a death. That emotional split would echo all the way to the final war, where blood ties meant nothing compared to ideology. Battle of Hogwarts. Everything the Black Sisters believed, fought for, and abandoned eventually came crashing together in the Battle of Hogwarts, the final clash between bloodline supremacy and the freedom to choose your own path. Bellatrix was front and center, gleefully unleashing chaos in Voldemort's name. By this time, she had completely abandoned any identity outside of her devotion to the Dark Lord. When she dueled Hermione, Ginny, and Luna, it wasn't just war, it was personal. She was fighting against a half-blood, a pureblood who didn't follow tradition, and a girl raised by non-pureblood values. In her mind, they were the living embodiment of everything wrong with the wizarding world. Narcissa, however, made one of the most pivotal decisions in the entire war, and it didn't involve a wand. When Voldemort ordered her to check if Harry Potter was dead, she bent down, asked Harry if Draco was alive, and when she heard he was, she lied to Voldemort. That single whispered lie, he is dead, wasn't allegiance to Harry. It wasn't rebellion against Voldemort. It was a mother choosing her child over her bloodline, over her family's ideology, over everything she was raised to believe. In that moment, Narcissa Malfoy severed her ties to the world Bellatrix died for. And Andromeda? She wasn't on the battlefield with a wand in hand like the Order, but her house became a safe haven for the survivors after Voldemort's fall, symbolizing compassion, unity, and a new generation free from the chains of blood ideology. She lost her husband and daughter in the war, paying a quiet but heavy price, yet she stood on the winning side of history, not through power, but through choice. At Hogwarts, the Black Sisters' stories reached their final forms. Bellatrix died defending a dead ideology. Narcissa lived by breaking away just in time. Andromeda survived by choosing love long before the war ever began. Character development. What makes the Black Sisters some of the most compelling figures in the Harry Potter universe isn't just their bloodline. It's how three women raised with the same values evolved in completely opposite directions. They weren't side characters. They were living embodiments of three paths born from the same root. Bellatrix represents what happens when pureblood doctrine is fully embraced without question. She didn't just believe in the ideology, she surrendered her entire identity to it. Her character arc is a descent, a transformation from noble pureblood daughter to Voldemort's most feared fanatic. She never grows, never questions herself. She becomes a cautionary tale. Loyalty without reflection turns a person into a weapon. Narcissa's development is subtle but crucial. On the surface, she seems like a background figure, always standing one step behind Lucius. But by the time the war ends, she shows more bravery than most Death Eaters ever did. She goes from being a product of her family's ideology to breaking it with a single act of maternal loyalty. Narcissa's arc is about quiet rebellion, the kind that doesn't come with wands blazing, but with a decisive choice that changes everything. Andromeda's development happens off-screen, but it's arguably the most powerful. She begins life exactly like her sisters, groomed to uphold the legacy, but she evolves by choosing a different life entirely. Her character arc is about freedom and sacrifice. She loses her family, her status, even her place in history, according to the Blacks, but she gains something far more valuable, a life where love is more important than bloodline. And in the end, she stands as the last surviving sister, not by force, but by living a life true to herself. Together, their story proves something important. Blood determines your beginning, not your destiny. Muggle-born relationships. Pureblood ideology taught the Black Sisters to view Muggle-borns as inferior, but how they each responded to that teaching reveals everything about their character. Bellatrix didn't just hate Muggle-borns, she delighted in their suffering. Her treatment of Hermione at Malfoy Manor was more than cruelty. It was a twisted performance of dominance, a manifestation of everything she believed about blood purity. To her, Muggleborns were an infection in the wizarding world, something to be purged. She became the brutal enforcer of pureblood supremacy. Narcissa's relationship with Muggleborns was distant but telling. She didn't go out of her way to harm them like Bellatrix did, but she still upheld the system that oppressed them. She tolerated cruelty as a consequence of maintaining status. She wasn't driven by hatred, she was driven by survival and reputation. Narcissa represents the passive side of prejudice, the type that doesn't act, but also doesn't intervene until forced to choose between ideology and family. Andromeda once again stood apart. By marrying Tet Tonks, she didn't just defy her family, she rejected their ideology entirely. In a world where blood status defined your entire worth, Andromeda made a choice that rewrote her future. And her daughter Nymphadora went on to fight for the Order, directly opposing everything the Black Legacy stood for. In the end, the Black Sisters weren't just characters, they were three mirrors, reflecting what happens when ideology meets identity. One wielded it, one endured it, one walked away from it.